Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025, and our great friend, Colonel Wilkerson, is here with us. Welcome back, Larry.
I'm glad to be with you, my dear friend. Judge is never going to live that down.
Larry, let me start. Please subscribe and hit like button, helping us because the algorithm works this way, and you may do that, and that would help us tremendously. And Larry, let me start with the case of Venezuela and what has happened with the case of the boat. They bombed the boat. Two survivors came out of the what has happened. And then they hit the second thought, the second bomb. They just assassinated the two survivors of the first attack. And here is what White House is talking about, and the response, because they were asking, that there are a lot of repercussions going on in the mainstream media and in the alternative media about what is happening for the case of Venezuela and the attacks. Here is what White House said.
Administration either confirm or deny or reveal whether or not there were survivors after that initial first strike, and what imminent threat would two survivors pose who were clinging presumably to the wreckage of that boat?
Again, as I said, I think you guys are sort of not listening fully to the statement I've provided. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was totally destroyed and the threat to the narco-terrorists, to the United States, was eliminated. And for any further questions about his thinking, I would defer you to the Department of War. I obviously wasn't in the room for the.
Yeah.
I'm glad she's taken the cross off of her neck, because in that particular instance, but many others previously, the cross would have turned into a flaming cross and burned her neck. That she's a Christian is laughable. She lies remarkably poorly. Christians lie better than that.
Yeah. And
she dropped the blame down on the admiral. She took it right off Hegseth and Trump, of course, by extension, and put it down on the admiral. Let me explain something. You probably know this, but maybe your listeners don't. World War II, a German Me-109 buzzes in on an American B-17. B-17 dropping bombs on German industry. The Me-109 German fighter pilot tasked with taking the B-17 down. He shoots the B-17 down. He shoots another B-17 down. Then a gunner on one of the B-17s or P-51 or another aircraft in escort brings him down. He manages to get out of his cockpit and under silk. He's parachuting down. In comes one of our fighter planes and machine guns him underneath that parachute. That is a war crime. Another instance, German prisoners are surrendering around the Battle of the Bulge, the German counteroffensive in the Ardennes, 44 and 45. American troops, rather than taking them into custody and sending them back to POW camps, shoot them. That was a war crime. It was called the Malmedy Massacre. What happened to those two people, as I understand it, in that boat or outside that boat after the initial strike was a war crime. And Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and that woman right there, for her lies, are guilty of aiding and abetting or ordering war crimes, period. There is no more discussion to it, not in international law and not in domestic law. And it's augmented in domestic law by the fact that no war has been declared by the Congress against these national security threats, narco-terrorists, to the United States. Not to even mention the fact that every vested intelligence community that I know of, US and European, you name it, claims that Nicolas Maduro is a narco-terrorist. Now, as the New York Times said, finally, I almost dropped the paper. They called it dissonance. Letting Hernandez out of jail, a confirmed and convicted narcotics trafficker, and going after Maduro, a person who is not a narco trafficker, that's dissonance. That's political dissonance. That's, oh, you think? All we're after is the oil, Nima. All we're after is the oil. And, Israel is after some other things, partly the oil too. Israel is going to be in desperate straits looking for gas and oil because the world is rapidly deciding that it isn't going to function with them anymore in that regard. And they get it at discounted prices because they cheat. They cheat all the time. They don't want to deal with anybody who won't give them discounted prices on their energy needs. And that's what they do all the time. So, anyway, got me started. War crimes. War crimes. The president of the United States of America is a war criminal. He is not a recipient of the Nobel Prize unless they bastardize themselves so grossly to do that. He is a war criminal. Where he belongs is not receiving the Nobel Prize for peace or anything else. Where he belongs is in The Hague before the International Criminal Court. And he needs to be convicted and sent to jail. Won't happen, of course, but that's the world.
Larry, Donald Trump said that Pete Hegseth didn't know about the second
bullshit.
Bombing.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
They're already dumping it on the admiral. And that's by Hegseth's instruction, I'll guarantee you. They're dumping it on the admiral. Now, I'm not relieving him of responsibility because he should have said not only no, but hell no. I'm not doing that. My understanding of the event is that it wasn't from the air. It was from an island. And it was a controlled drone, if you will. Drones can be on their own or they can be controlled by someone using the communications capability, lasers, whatever. And that what they did was see clearly that the people were in the water or whatever outside the boat and had survived the initial strike. And then they hit them again. That was probably a decision made by, I would guess at the highest level, it was made by the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. It was at a minimum made by the admiral, or it could have been, we've gotten so bad lately, Nima, with special operating forces, it could have been delegated to the team leader and he made the decision.
Yeah.
But anyway, look at it, it's a war crime.
Here is what Pete Hegseth said, Larry.
Oh, good. I get to listen to that.
I'll say again, we've only just begun striking narco boats and putting narco terrorists at the bottom of the ocean because they've been poisoning the American people. And Joe Biden tried to approach it with kid gloves and allowed them to come across the border. Cartels take over community, 20 million people, hundreds of thousands of Americans poisoned. And President Trump said, no, we're taking the gloves off. We're taking the fight to these designated terror organizations, and that's exactly what we're doing. So we're stopping the drugs, we're striking the boats, we're defeating narco terrorists, and we're standing...
And Peter, you may say one thing, that drugs coming in through the sea by sea are down 91%.
That's hogwash. That's a lie. That's a lie so big that it would not be containable in a GP large tent. Down by 91%. We struck for month after month after month in the Caribbean, on the other side in the Pacific, and even occasionally in Mexico. Month after month after month after month for a year. And the most reduction we got was 11%. They are lying through their teeth, which they have made a profession in this administration, especially the president, lying through his teeth. And let's just examine this further. Nothing is going to stop the flow of drugs into the United States of America except going for the center of gravity of that situation, what the Germans call the center of gravity. You know what the center of gravity is? The people sucking down the drugs. Let me say that again. The people sucking down the drugs, the CEOs, the COOs, the computer engineers, all the people that are sucking down the drug, including the poor people that do it because they have no other alternative. They have to have it to even live. That's the center of gravity of the drug war. That's who you go after to make a sizable dent into narco-terrorism. It's not the people growing the poppies. It's not the people in the chem labs making the synthetics, fentanyl. It's not any of that. It's not the people transporting them. It's the people taking the drugs. Nima, do you think that they would be transporting those drugs if they weren't received at the other end and used? That's the stupidity of all of this. That was the stupidity of Ronald Reagan, the stupidity of George H.W. Bush, the stupidity of George W. Bush, every single president, war on drugs. Idiocy. And yet we did it. We did it because it was politically palatable. The American people don't want to be told, Europeans don't want to be told that they are the reason. They don't want to be told that their habit is the reason. It's not narco-terrorism. Bullshit. It's the people taking the drugs. Listen, Americans, you are the problem. You bastards taking the drugs are the problem. But we're not coming after you. We're going after the poor campesinos and others that maybe scratch out a living over it. And the heinous people who run the whole thing and make billions. I agree with that. But it's not narco-terrorism. Dull, baby. Petey, baby. And the military going along with it and doing what they're doing is simply unconscionable. I have to conclude right now, this moment. I really do fear that we might have a coup d'etat because the military would go along with it.
Larry, nobody here in Latin America sees Donald Trump serious in the way that he's talking about. You mentioned, you go after these boats. What would be the outcome? You have to get to the roots of what's going on. And that is politically through talks, between the head of the states, not, going after these people in boats.
Maduro's not a drug trafficker. There isn't a professional intelligence agency in the world, except maybe for Mossad for different reasons, that would say he was a drug trafficker. If he deals in drugs at all, it's personal and it's petty. He is not the problem. And anyone who knows the routes will tell you where the cocaine comes from, and it doesn't come from Venezuela. And they'll tell you where the fentanyl comes from, and it doesn't come from Venezuela. You go back and read Misha Glenny's book of a few years ago, about 20 years ago now, where he tells you that $5 trillion goes down every year, orchestrated out of Doha, Tel Aviv, New York City, banks doing the money laundering and everything. $5 trillion goes down. It's probably 10 trillion now because it's been 20 years since Misha wrote the book. And he will tell you that the number one thing is human trafficking. Then you throw in organ trafficking. Then you throw in prostitution and so forth. And then maybe you throw in illicit drugs. It'll be in there somewhere. And he will tell you that the real reason the thing functions is these banks. Banks in New York, banks in Doha, banks in Tel Aviv. That's why it functions. That's where they launder their money. That's how they get the billions. So we don't attack the right things. We attack the poor campesino, the poor farmer raising the poppy or raising the cocoa, or we go after the people running the labs. And I'm not so sure that that isn't what we should be doing. Everybody should be going after these lab things, because what Misha tells you is that in the future, and this is coming about, in the future, growing crops like poppies and making opium and growing other crops and making cocaine and so forth is going to be in the past. Now it's much more profitable and much easier, logistically and otherwise, to make these drugs in a laboratory. And India, in particular, is producing the chemists that are going to flood the world. They're already flooding the world. And these chemists are going to go to work in these labs, and they're going to make these esoteric drugs that these people in Europe and the United States are going to take. And that's going to be the new narco terrorists in the world, these drugs. And fentanyl is one of the first initial cases of this chemically made drug that turns out to be, have some use in real medicine and kills people in the drug world. So that's where we are, and we're there because we never have the right policies. These are stupid, idiotic policies. But that's de rigueur for the Trump administration. It shouldn't have been de rigueur for Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Obama, and a host of others, but everyone just continued it.
Larry, people, from Republicans, Democrats, they're all talking about the attack on Venezuela. They're going against the policies of the Trump administration, saying that would bring huge, sort of chaos to the region, and what would happen to the face, to the United States in the aftermath of any attack if that fails, if that succeeds. They are warning about that. But is there anybody in the Trump administration considering these people? Because it's not just about Democrats. We have Republicans talking about the attack on Venezuela would be devastating for the United States.
Well, I understand that yesterday or the day before they moved Laura Loomer over to the Pentagon, so maybe we'll have someone now. I say that. God bless the Pentagon if it survives Laura Loomer. I think it's all bluff. I think it's all a big bluff. I think Trump is a big bluffer. In this case, I think he's bluffing. And the fact that he's talking apparently to Maduro on the telephone occasionally, he's giving him his wants. And Maduro apparently, from what I'm hearing, is more or less agreeing to some of them, if not all of them. He's ready. His powder's dry, and he's ready if something happens. And so are the Russians, and so are the Chinese. John Mearsheimer talks about, and John's right, we have just watched a major component of what I've been talking about, the power moving to the east. The Monroe Doctrine is dead because Russia has put warships in the Western Hemisphere, and those warships promise to aid Venezuela. Now, you don't know what else they put in the Western Hemisphere. Maybe a Poseidon, maybe a submarine we can't find. But he's right. Mearsheimer's right. This is a new theater of battle in this immense war that is already taking place between China, Russia, India, and in that order, or in the order of Russia, China, India, but we want it to be China, Russia, India. And Russia has just trumped us by saying essentially, you don't think it's bad for your forces to be on my near abroad? I'll just put some forces on your near abroad. And oh, by the way, I think I'll put them in the proximity of that big ass, soon to be sunk aircraft carrier called the Gerald Ford. So checkmate, Donald.
Larry, before coming up to this live, you were talking about that you listened to Vladimir Putin and comparing Vladimir Putin to Donald Trump and the way that he sees the benefit of Russia, what Russia wants, specifically with the United States, with the case of the relationship with the United States and in Ukraine. And how do you see the two leaders? How do they really talking about, are they really talking about the objectives, the main objectives, as in their sort of strategy that they have in their mind for the countries that they're serving?
I think I told you before we went on the air that I did an interview with Rick Sanchez in Russia Today this morning, and one of the first things he did, besides playing the speech, he had to play the speech, I think, that Putin was giving. So much academic and press freedom, but you got to do what you got to do. But before he did that, he had shown me a film, and then the film was continued to open the interview of Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and Dmitriev coming out of the hotel or wherever they were and going on a tour of Moscow. And he kind of asked me, what do you think that means? And I said, you are looking at Trump's diplomacy. Who's it led by? The leading member of the Trump clan, amassing billions and billions of dollars because of Donald Trump. That's who it's led by. So that sums up the policy. What we're doing here is just talking about Ukraine ancillarily. It's just something we talk about and use as a vehicle. What we're talking about is what Sergei Lavrov said to Marco Rubio in Riyadh a few months ago. Do you know you lost $300 billion not dealing with us? That's what we're talking about. And that's what's got Trump salivating, is the prospect of a real rapprochement with Moscow and all the money and the hotels he's going to build and the peace prize he's going to win. All of that is what motivates Trump. And that was a vivid demonstration of that. You didn't show Sergei Lavrov. You didn't show Marco Rubio. You didn't show Volodymyr I can't even say his name anymore. Zelensky.
Yeah, Volodymyr Zelensky.
Yeah, you showed Kushner, the architect of the big deal in Gaza, and you showed Witkoff, the other architect of the big deal in Gaza, which is no big deal. It's a sellout of the United Nations and a complete sellout of the Palestinians, but it's going to make money. And Jared's going to get a big piece of that money. That's Donald Trump. And that's what this is all about. So you ask me, what will Ukraine have to give up? Everything, if Russia wants it, and Russia wants it. So, I mean, he's going to have to figure out how to plaster over this deal. But his major motive is demonstrated. Witkoff, real estate. Kushner, real estate. What else do you need to know? Rubio, murderer, neoconservative, asshole. No, you got real estate and real estate. Hegseth, war criminal. Who could he send other than the real estate kingpins, Kushner and Witkoff?
I don't know if you saw the footage of the meeting. It was Vladimir Putin together with Ushakov and Kirill Dmitriev. Lavrov was not there. And on the other hand, we had, Steve Witkoff together with Kushner.
I don't know what's with Sergei right now. I wish I did. I don't know whether he's got some illness haunting him or, he makes these kind of in and out appearances. Then just a short time ago, he was gone for quite a while. Or maybe it's just Putin wants to match Trump.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to have any diplomats there.
Yeah, that could be the case because Rubio is not there. What's the reason for
I keep going back to Tucker Carlson's recommendation, according to Tucker, to Donald Trump. You don't want to make Rubio your vice president. They'll assassinate you.
Yeah.
So Trump is, okay, Marco, keep your distance.
Larry, Vladimir Putin was asked about Europeans if Russia would attack Europe or is planning to attack Europe. Here is what Vladimir Putin said.
Add that 100 times. We have no plans of fighting against Europe. But if Europe wants to fight and they start this fight, then we are ready right now. There is no doubt about this. But the only question is, if Europe starts the war, unleashes this war, because that's not Ukraine. With Ukraine, we use some surgical means. We are trying to be really careful. Because you understand why. This is not a war in the direct sense of the word. And if Europe, all of a sudden, wants to start a war, and if it does start a war, then very rapidly there might be a situation where we have no one to negotiate with.
Yeah.
What he was saying, in essence, was they may start a war, but I'll end it.
Yeah.
And you don't know how it'll end.
Yesterday, Larry, I was talking with Paul Carrick-Roberts together with Larry Johnson. One of the main points that there was some sort of disagreement between Larry and Paul, it was the way that Russia is, carrying out the war in Ukraine. Paul was saying that Russia is not strong enough to show the force, just going. And Larry said that he was describing the situation with Russia, how Russia sees Ukraine, as Vladimir Putin just said it. We are not, this is not a war. He literally said, this is not a war in Ukraine. We are trying to somehow, it's a special military operation. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem that they would change their strategy in Ukraine until the end, to put an end to the conflict.
Putin is a very careful student of Clausewitz. And Clausewitz, in my view, is probably the premier war theorist still in the world. Now, Clausewitz's role model, I think, was Napoleon, because Clausewitz wastes no opportunity in saying that the prince and the general ought to be the same person, ideally. Then you have no possible communications foul up. When you have a president who's a civilian or a prime minister who's a civilian and a general who is a military professional, there's always that occasion or possibility of a foul up in misunderstanding of orders or. But if the prince is also the marshal, there's no chance of a miscommunication. The marshal can make a mistake, the prince can make a mistake, but as Napoleon did. But that's the ideal situation. And the reason Clausewitz feels that way is because it's so important that the political side imbues the execution side, the military, with the concept and the purpose of why he's going out to kill people. And that's so important to get that right and to keep it. And this is important in Clausewitz. You can't stop. On the first day, the president can't say, okay, I sent him out. Okay, now the war. Go ahead, you prosecute the war. You do the war. No, you have to stay in constant contact, because every day of killing people has its own dynamic. Every day of not being victorious has its own dynamic. So Putin is a student of that. And he's played this Clausewitzian all along, never using too much, never using too little, always keeping in his mind the ultimate purpose, which is to secure his near abroad, period. It's from a military professional's point of view, it's marvelous to watch him and to listen to him and all those around him who understand at least somewhat what he's doing. But he's the premier strategist here, and he apparently now has worked his way through the military executioners to get to the best. And they have worked their way through the subordinates that are necessary to carry out a conflict in a way that is productive of victory, political victory. And that's key, political victory, not military victory, political victory. Often political victory is what you get to get there, but not always. You have to know when to stop and start and so forth. Also, you have to play every day as differently. That's the most important lesson of Clausewitz. And I've not seen anyone on the face of the earth in my time, 81 years on this earth, arguably 70 of them sentient, as good at it as Putin. There's no way he's going to lose this, in my view. He's going to win, and he's going to win at the table, too. He's going to win at the table big time. And it will be to Europe's utter discredit and ultimate peril if it doesn't recognize that and somehow acknowledge and accommodate it, and not by building up Germany or some other mechanism within Europe to, in the future, take on Russia. That would be a tragic mistake, as he was trying to hint there. Tragic mistake, especially now that we're looking at some of the things we're looking at. These weapons that are coming out now, match them with nuclear weapons, or match them with, maybe I shouldn't even say nuclear weapons, match them with the killing power modern technology gives to these weapons. We have a different battlefield, a different war scenario, if you will, if we go big time, peer power to peer power. No one's going to win from that. Clausewitz is out the window. And he has this. He talks about the absurdity of war with no possible political purpose. You just go to war to kill people. I mean, that's kind of the way you had to look at it then. He didn't know about nuclear weapons. Think about that. Think about that theory in terms of nuclear weapons. You are utterly stupid. You are utterly absurd. That's the best word. That comes right out of Albert Camus' philosophy. It's absurd to go to war without a genuine political purpose. And when you go to war with nuclear weapons, you do not have a genuine political purpose other than suicide. So he had, even though he didn't know about nuclear weapons, he has a vivid lesson for nuclear war planners in On War, Vom Krieg, his book.
Larry Zaluzhny, he said that the security guarantees for Ukraine in the aftermath, or during the talk, considering it's a settlement in Ukraine, he's talking about deploying nuclear weapons in Ukraine as one of the, supposed security guarantees.
Who's talking about that?
Zaluzhny, the former, Ukrainian ambassador right now. He's the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
How is that? Who's going to provide that? What is the basis of going in that direction?
The last thing on the face of the earth I would do is give anyone in Ukraine, anyone, a nuclear weapon. Last thing I would do. Thank God we figured that out at the end of the Cold War and took them away. We acceded to that. We were very much in favor of that, taking the nuclear weapons that were not in Russia proper, if you will, and bringing them back to Russia proper.
He's talking about NATO membership. We've learned from the NATO Secretary General. It seems that he said that all the members should agree on the entry of Ukraine in NATO. And it seems that there is no agreement, among the NATO members. That's gone. The NATO membership, in my opinion, is not going to happen. And the other point is foreign, military forces capable of confronting Russia in Ukraine.
Neutral. Ukraine must be neutral.
Yeah. Who are these forces? Are they coming from Brazil, from China, from, I don't know, from India, maybe?
If they are formally Chapter 6 or Chapter 7 peacekeeping forces or peace enforcement forces, I would say they'd have to come from the BRICS or somewhere that wouldn't be contaminated immediately. It couldn't come from Europe or the United States. They'd have to come from some countries that Russia would be comfortable with.
Maybe Indonesia, I don't know, some Asian countries.
Although the Indonesians are getting used a lot now. They're supposed to go to Gaza too.
Yeah. Yeah. But after all, Larry, you think that what is happening right now, today they had a meeting, Steve Witkoff had a meeting with Vladimir Putin. Do you think that they were talking about the military size, 600, 800, they're talking, which is not possible.
I think those kind of details would be left if they're doing it right now. If they're doing it right, if they have working groups set up. You set these working groups up with experts from DOD, DOW, DOS, all the different agencies and equivalents in Russia. And each one of these working groups is expert in one of the issues, and they work the details. The big guys don't work the details. The working groups then come back to the summit, if you will, or the sub-summit group, and they give the results, and they massage it, and then they go back to negotiations again. That's what we haven't done in the past. I hope we're doing that with this group. Although I really worry about finding the experts in this administration to compose all these various working groups. I worry about that with nuclear weapons too, because all I see in this administration at the subsurface level anyway, where the working groups would be formed, is Hegseth types and Bondi types and Noem types and Kash Patel types. That isn't going to work. These people are not just obstreperous. They're not just vile. They're incompetent. And you don't want incompetent people working in these working groups. You want experts.
Do you feel that the Trump administration or Donald Trump himself has decided, has Trump decided to, to stop supporting Ukraine and the war in Ukraine? Because that would be the crucial point if the United States is not there to help them.
Today he has. What about tomorrow after Macron or Starmer
Yeah.
or somebody gets to him, or Zelensky even? I think Zelensky's lost his card with Trump. I really do. I think he's lost it. I don't think Trump wants to even be in his presence again, unless it's pro forma. But you never know with Trump. Somebody gets to him and they moved Laura Loomer over to defense. So now we got this unknown factor at defense. What she's going to do at defense boggles the mind. She's the one giving him all the artificial intelligence on Nicolas Maduro.
You know what's so absurd, Larry, about Europe? Everybody's talking about, the settlement in Ukraine. They're talking about, something else, how to fight Russia. These are two different paths to deal with the issue of Ukraine. And you mentioned Macron. Here is what Macron said in his meeting he had with Zelensky. Just look at the absurdity of what he's talking about.
You know, he wasn't screaming at Candace Owens.
You never hear of corruption in Russia because there's no body, independent body to look into it. So when we are supporting war efforts, it is important that we are very demanding and that we ensure that people are held accountable. But the fight against corruption works because there are investigations and decisions made. But what is deeply concerning is that you never hear of corruption in Russia because, again, of the way the system has been put in place and created.
I'm sorry, Mr. President. We're not talking about corruption in Russia because corruption in Russia has absolutely nothing to do with the battlefield. Winning, losing, drawing has nothing to do with the battlefield because Russia's won. So if they won through corruption or they won through lily-white purity is inconsequential. You're stupid, Mr. Frenchman, but I knew that. It makes no sense. He's diverting the conversation because he doesn't know anything of substance to talk about. What difference does it make if Joe Stalin is corrupt as hell, fires all his generals, makes a huge mistake, loses 20 million troops, but marches to Berlin and wins the freaking war? You know, I don't want to know about Joe Stalin's corruption. I don't care about Joe Stalin's corruption. What I care about is the person I'm giving money to and backing being corrupt. You idiot Frenchman, go away.
Larry, I really think that Europe needs to decide about, they need to decide about the way that they're, approaching the case of Ukraine. Because when you see Witkoff is there, Kushner is there, it shows that how serious Donald Trump. Kushner is there, in my opinion, it's something different. Yes. That shows how serious is for
big
Donald
signal.
Trump.
Big signal.
Exactly, big signal. That's the way I perceive it. And on the other hand, there is no way of putting an end to the conflict in Ukraine without considering Russians, without considering Europeans to be part of the deal, Larry, because it's the region. The region is Europe together with Russia, and Ukraine is there, as a buffer zone. They call it buffer zone,
right.
Neutral state, whatever they would call it. But after all, I think Europe needs to be there. And here is one of the European reporters asking Kaya Kallas, if Europe would have someone like Steve Witkoff in the negotiations. Here is what Kaya Kallas responded.
Wouldn't be at this point perhaps useful to open direct negotiation with Moscow and send there a kind of a European Witkoff? Thank you.
Well, everybody has been very clear, especially the Russians, that they have no interest in peace right now. So again, I mean, we need to put them in the position where they need to negotiate. Right now, they are not in that position because they think that they can outlast us, and they also hope that there's a very good offer made because they see that there's a lot of pressure to put on the victim, but none really sacrifices asked from them. At least we don't know that any of the sacrifices have been asked for them. So clearly, I mean, they want to negotiate with those who are just offering them something on top of what they already have. This is clearly their interest, but it shouldn't be ours.
Yeah,
she is a perfect example of why the Council is not useful, and in fact is dangerous, and why the EU as a whole is dangerous, because they become an entity unto themselves. And they make pronouncements like that, which are utterly ridiculous. She is a pure demonstration of what's wrong with this whole setup right now with regard to Europe, with regard to the EU, and the interface between them. There is no reason why she should even be speaking, if you want to know the truth of the matter. The individual leaders of the countries in Europe should be speaking. And if I were they, I would object strenuously, and I'm sure people like Viktor Orban and perhaps some others will, to what she's saying. And then on top of that, it's nonsense what she's saying. You heard that little innuendo in there, that there are those who have given them something, meaning the Russians, meaning the United States, but we're not going to give them anything. Therefore, we wouldn't have anybody there. That innuendo tells you how unuseful, in fact, dangerous is the EU in this whole thing. And I've said it, I'll say it again. If we bring some kind of resolution here, we being the United States and Russia, the EU and other forces in Ukraine, like the Nazis, will not let it rest. They will not let it rest. They will perturbate this thing for a decade, or until it eats their lunch, or until Putin gets so tired of it, he smacks one of them and smacks them really hard. That's the danger of this U.S. Moscow rapprochement, if you will, money flowing again and everything else. And suddenly you've got these irascible Europeans and these Nazis in Ukraine who are colluding together and keeping the fires burning. That's the real problem with the future of Ukraine, in my view.
Yeah. Laurie, look at this, what Peskov said today morning. He said Russia wants to resolve the conflict for generations. They don't want a temporary solution for the case of Ukraine. They're talking about, Paul Kerrick-Roberts keeps talking about Yalta agreement, something big, something, a security guarantee between the West and Russia.
Russians are the only ones who want that. And maybe Trump now. But the other side doesn't. You got to have two sides to tango. And you can talk about Yalta conferences. You can talk about all of them. No one in this is unconditionally surrendering. No one has been utterly devastated, even Ukraine. They've certainly been more devastated than Russia, but neither side, and principally because of the backing of Ukraine by the European Union, by NATO, by Washington, neither side has been wiped out. Neither side has said, I unconditionally surrender to you, do whatever, So you have a recipe, Yalta, you got to be kidding me. You got a recipe for a bitter struggle continuing for a decade or two. And the only side that doesn't want that is the Russians. The other side salivates over the prospect because they'll make lots of money off of it too. And they'll look at that as the only glue keeping that bastardization on the face of the earth, the European Union, together. Their jobs count on this thing continuing at a low burner rate, but continuing. We're in a mess. We're in a mess. And we helped produce it. The empire helped produce it. And now we're backing away from it. Okay, we produced a mess. We don't like being in a mess. Okay, we're going to go make some money. This is really crass, but it's what the empire does these days. Look at Afghanistan. Look at Iraq. Look at Libya. Look at Somalia. Look at Syria, where we're now back again to killing Christians at an alarming rate, with the Israelis pitching in to help. You can't.
Larry, did you watch the video, the pictures coming out of Israel that shows the thousands of Israelis in line, at a Portuguese embassy for, citizenship appointments? It shows how desperate is the situation in Israel. Why do they need to do that? Mostly these people are well educated, and they want to get out of Israel.
There's some people in New York who tell me that the population of Jewish members of the city of New York might go up by 500,000 in the next 6 months. They're getting out. They understand. One thing they understand is that they've lost. And I'm not sure they understand, and I can sympathize with this, empathize with it. They don't understand how badly that will recur. Will they go to war with Iran? They know what that'll be, I think, intuitively, if not intellectually. They're already convinced that they lost the 12-day war, really, because that word has gotten around. Netanyahu's stranglehold on propaganda inside Israel is not quite as tight as he thinks it is. So they're worried. They're worried. And you've got you've got people leaving in the north because Hezbollah is making their staying in the places they came back to untenable. No one's talking about that a lot, and that's one reason why Israel keeps violating the ceasefire. They're not doing a lot about it up there. They're doing it down in the south because that's more propitious for their ultimate aims to take over that whole region in Lebanon. I was told that the projection for Israel proper, I think it was 7.2 million Jewish citizens of Israel, and 7.8 million Arab or Palestinian or Christian citizens of Israel. I was told it's down to about 7 even on the other side. And with the Jewish citizens, it's down to as low as 5, maybe even below 5. So that you're looking at 2 million plus who've already left. And like you said, they're queuing up. Why would you want to stay in a state whose purpose, avowed purpose, was your security? Unlike any other place on the world, there's no anti-Semitism there. You're secure. Why would you want to stay in a place that tells you that and bombs are going off around you for 2 years and you're getting sort of shellacked a couple of times and you're looking at all these death rows? You're looking in the paper at the number of people killed, the number of people committing suicide, the number of people who have post-traumatic stress, whom Netanyahu likes to call traitors. And you're looking at Bibi Netanyahu as in control and in charge and the boss man. And his wife. Oh, I watched a video of his wife this morning that was videos of the woman who did the Bibi files. And she showed all these videos on his wife being questioned and so forth. They're cut from the same cloth. They're vile creatures. And they've been leading Israel now for at least 20 years. Yeah. And the other thing that comes across is she's as important as he is. I mean, this isn't Nancy Reagan. This isn't Hillary Clinton. This is tag team. Bibi and the crook and Bibi. Watch those videos if you get a chance. It's the woman who made the Bibi Files, the documentary or whatever. She did just hours of videos of both him and his wife under interrogation by the police or whomever. You wonder why they haven't taken them both out in the street and hung them. Or this would be very fitting. Take them out in the street, make them carry their own crosses and crucify them.
By the way, Netanyahu is asking, the president of Israel to pardon him.
I know. And Trump's probably weighing in every other hour and telling the president of Israel, vote for me for the Peace Prize and pardon him.
Yeah. But it's not just about the president of Israel. The opposition in Israel asking if he wants a pardon, he wants to be pardoned, he has to retire from politics. Early elections in
It's a way to get
Israel.
rid of it.
Yeah. I don't see Netanyahu doing this, Larry.
I don't
It's
either.
impossible. It's impossible. Do you think that would happen?
I don't. Here's the way I look at it. Try to picture this for a moment. Netanyahu's standing there, his brazen, braggadocio, evil self, and all of a sudden he's not prime minister anymore. It'd be like a cartoon. He'd go poof. He'd disappear. All the juice would run out of him. He's gone. Where'd he go? He can't live without it. He can't exist without it. To a certain extent, I watched Sharon in sort of the same capacity. He was not quite as addicted, if you will, as Bibi, but I watched what he looked like afterwards, and I said, wow, what a deflated man. Bibi will be completely deflated. He'd be like a balloon, all the air gone. So he won't leave, not willingly anyway.
And the government, that the government in Israel is trying to reform legislation, in Israel. They want to, to stop that. The president of Israel is asking Netanyahu to stop that if he wants to be pardoned.
Yeah, he might make a good deal for Israel. He might even possibly resurrect some aspects of their democracy because Netanyahu has destroyed it. But you know what I think about a democratic Jewish state in the Levant? Doesn't have a future. Poof, gone. Could there be a state of Israel? Could there be a state of Israel-Palestine? Could there be an Israel-Palestine confederation like we do every other Sunday? Yes, there could be that. Vague out there in the future, maybe, if you got a lot of support for it and you put a lot of weight behind it and you tried to do it. But there isn't going to be a Jewish state in the Levant, period. Categorically, there will not be a Jewish state in the Levant.
Yeah. The other point of the president of Israel is that they want to investigate October,
Yeah.
October the 7th.
And what they've done preliminarily does not look
good. That would bring a lot of, repercussions.
Yeah. Might be a firing squad for Bibi after that's over.
Yeah. That's why I don't see Netanyahu doing any of these, he's not going to do anything, to be part.
I think you're right.
Larry, I saw an interview with Abdi Alaudinov. Abdi Alaudinov, we were talking about with Larry Johnson the other day. You remember that when he went to Russia, he met with Abdi Alaudinov, General Abdi Alaudinov. He was in charge of the Kursk region, in the battle in the Kursk region. He's from Chechnya, and he's so prominent. It seems that he's one of the main generals in this war in Ukraine. And here is how he compared the way that Russia is fighting in Ukraine and the way that Netanyahu or Israelis are fighting, in Gaza.
As an expert in urban combat, how do you assess the Israeli army's actions in Gaza? How does their tactics differ from Russia's in the special military operation?
Does Israel have tactics? Israel is a fascist state. No tactics when Israel uses American-made bombs and missiles to kill tens of thousands of women, children, elders. Is that tactics? No, wait, we're fighting Ukraine. If you've seen us fight like that anywhere, then compare us. Israel has no combat tactics. They destroy everything in front of them, sparing no women, children, or elders. That's not tactics. I'll repeat, it's the absence of any tactics.
Interestingly, when we look at what Israel supporters say, their argument is that, unfortunately, you can't fight any other way in such a large city with ongoing battles. The only way is to bomb everything and destroy around. You have urban combat experience, too. Is that argument really valid?
That's nonsense. That argument means nothing. I liberated 36 settlements in the Luhansk People's Republic with Akhmat Special Forces, including major cities like Rubizhne, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk. Go there and see if they're destroyed like Gaza's cities. Did we kill tens of thousands of women, children, elders? No. We fight people who fight us with weapons. We don't fight women, children, or elders. That's the difference between the Russian and Israeli armies. There, it's women, children, elders, hiding behind supposed militants somewhere. But sorry, if you can't fight those militants and instead kill the entire Palestinian people, what kind of soldiers are you? You're fascists who deserve no respect. So I don't think the Russian army compares to the Israeli one at all. We not only don't kill women, children, elders, we even try to spare our enemies' lives. If you look me up online, you'll see I always order my fighters, if possible, take them prisoner alive, don't kill them, even our enemies. But the Israelis kill tens of thousands of women, children, elders, and say they can't do otherwise. In that case, they shouldn't fight. Just go home and live their lives, not torment people, not torment or kill a whole nation.
Yeah.
Bingo. Bingo. He's absolutely spot on correct. I couldn't have said it better. I'm not comparing myself militarily to him because he's quite a guy, but I couldn't have said it any better. They're murderers. They're killers. Killers for hire in uniform, driving tanks and running around artillery rounds and flying airplanes. But they are not soldiers. They are not sailors. They're not airmen. They're not Marines. They're not any of that. They are killers, pure and simple. Now, they didn't used to be that way. I knew the IDF when it was Moshe Dayan's IDF. And while I didn't agree with a lot of the things they did, I certainly didn't agree with the way they were founded and the way they grew up in that founding. I knew there'd be problems. Everybody knew there'd be problems. We all knew in the military. You read the Joint Staff Report, and it pretty much predicts what's going to happen. But when they went on garrison and occupation duty, they fell apart as a conventional, well-trained, armored force-based military. They became what garrison soldiers usually become, really bad, even evil cops. That's what they became. Every day they butt stroked some woman. They smacked some man. They stole somebody's work permit. For whom that work permit was their life. They stopped them at a checkpoint arbitrarily. They grew very, very powerful. They grew to be just like the settlers in the West Bank, who will kill you if you look at them wrong, or if you're just Palestinian. They probably are the worst example of a military on the face of the earth today. And wow, does that include a lot of people, including in Sudan and other places where atrocities happen almost every week. They are as bad or worse. Now, we're partly responsible for that, Nima, because we've never checked them at all. We've never done anything really to put a finger in their face and say, you know, this garrison duty, this occupation duty is corrupting your forces. And all you got to do is go to a checkpoint and watch and see what they do, just routinely for fun. Go out to the snipers where they're shooting 16-year-olds, kneecapping them. You know, they get too close to the fence, they kneecap them, knowing full well that the guy will never walk again, probably. This is occupation force duty. This is stupid. You're ruining your military.
I think what is happening to Israel, you know, to the Israeli soldiers mentally, that would appear in the next, you know, decade. You see how devastating that.
And a lot of
could
that's
influence.
reservists. A lot of that's reservists too, who don't necessarily fit the bill I just described. I mean, they did occupation duty, but they would rotate. The regulars, I would dare say, I haven't looked at this, but I would dare say that the highest rates of PTSD, the highest rates of suicide are amongst the regulars rather than amongst the reservists, because the reservists are not in that mold that I just described to you necessarily. Now, some of them might be, but the reservists did get called out a little more than usual for occupation duty because they didn't have enough.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Thank you for the interview.
See you on Friday.
Friday, yes. Oh, my God. It's getting so cold here. I'm out of my Aloha attire. Take care.
Take care, Larry. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.